tonight,
Lionel, is that you?
There, I think I got it. Dave?
Lionel.
Dave.
Lionel.
Is this the first? You're never going to believe who we're talking to tonight.
Oh, no?
I got you in the studio special.
Oh, now you got me looking forward to it. Okay.
We got to start again. I didn't have the microphone anywhere near me.
That does sound much deeper, much more baritone.
So we cut out the first, maybe, well, depends. Maybe the first 19 seconds was comedy gold.
I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, good evening, Lionel.
Good evening, Dave. So, hey, we will only talk about it briefly, but some time ago, back in, I guess it was like the first week, well, it was the last weekend in July, August, yeah, it was the last weekend in July, last full weekend in July. I got to go to Crescent.
You did?
Holy mackerel, am I ever glad?
You did.
I only got to go for like a couple of nights, one day and a couple of nights, but holy mackerel, am I ever glad I went?
I'm glad to hear that. Excellent.
Yeah,
you had a good time.
We will have chatted about this in the past on Uncle Dave's Fireside Chats, but man, for anybody that's it was on the Patreon channel, and for anybody that didn't hear it, I highly recommend you join Patreon just to listen to the story about Crescent, because holy mackerel, what an experience!
Yeah, it's a great experience, fun place, and I'm glad that we were able to do that. You and I together. That's awesome.
I couldn't believe how many trains go by that place.
It's a busy stretch. 100%.
The first night I was there, I stayed up till like, I don't know, 12:30, sitting on the front porch with Josh, who was, knew every train that was coming. And
Yep.
So I stayed up on, maybe 12:30, I forget, maybe even later. Finally went to bed. Couldn't get to sleep, of course. And then around 2:30, I heard a train outside, but there was activity. It sounded like another train had pulled up, or this train had stopped, or something. And I lay there listening to it all, and I was like, I almost got out of bed and got dressed just to go down to the front porch and see what was going on.
Yeah, and it's still an interchange town, which is exciting. You're hard on the main line. You're 150 feet from one of the busiest mountain main lines in the world, and it's an exciting place to hang out. And the group of guys that come out year after year is a lot of fun. I'm thrilled you had a good time. That's exciting.
Yeah. Well, speaking of good times, tonight we're going to talk to Mike. Have you ever heard of a guy named Mike Burgett?
As a matter of fact, I have. Yes, he's a bit of a hero of mine with his signal knowledge and experience. And gives a high bar for a lot of us to shoot up to.
Yeah, I guess I should probably just ask one question and then step aside.
Well, I'll be asking some questions too.
All right.
Make no mistake about it. Well, this is exciting. Is he just down in the green room there?
He's just down the hall in the green room.
All right. Stand by.
Okay.
Mike, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Mike.
Hey.
It's good to see you, my friend.
Yes, how are you?
This is fantastic. Come on up.
Yeah.
Dave, you're always so light on your feet.
Well, depends on how late at night at Crescent it is.
You could have been a dancer.
That'd be good for a few laughs.
Yeah, that was kind of weird that I had to share a washroom with you. You had to walk past me to take a squirt.
No, I just peed off the fire escape.
Oh, did you?
Yep.
All right.
Nothing to worry about.
I wondered why the Crescent Police were looking for you.
Mike, it is a pleasure to hear your voice. This is great.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for coming. This is going to be great because, but Dave, did you know it? Like Mike Burgett's layout is becoming like one of the premier layouts in the country.
I would argue premier layouts in the world.
Yeah, premier
It's-
layouts in the world.
It's a very exciting time, and just as this whole idea of animation catches on, and last year we talked to Tony Custer a couple times, and he mentioned animation is sort of one of the next frontiers of the hobby. Mike has been pushing that envelope with the most important animation besides the trains themselves, which is signaling for people that like CTC like he and I do.
Isn't that against the law on model railroading these days? Aren't you supposed to be a timetable and train order guy?
Oh, those guys. Yeah. They mean well.
For some of us, we build model railroads so we can have model CTC systems.
I love it. Yep.
As you probably remember, Lionel, I actually built the CTC machine a full year before the first piece of bench work ever went up in the basement.
That's right. And weren't you involved with some company, or you bought some company or something that made CTC parts or something?
Yep. The old Photoelectric Company, which was a rod loader out of Salem, Oregon endeavor. Rod passed the company along to me, and I renamed it Control Train Components. And I had it for about 10 years, and I've turned it over to Alan Bell, and we've kind of split the duties of it. The manufacturing of the parts and the boxing things up, shipping them was never a love of mine, but definitely the engineering, the design aspect was always something I enjoyed. So Alan, who is a mechanical engineer by trade, does all the manufacturing of the components. He's got a small little machine shop in his garage, and he handles all the interaction with the customers, and I do all of the engineering and answer customers' technical questions. So I get to do the fun stuff.
Do you guys have a website?
Absolutely. It's www.ctcparts.com.
All right, let me look this up. This is always the most exciting part. Run that one by me again.
www.ctcparts,
CTC
parts.com.
All right. .com. Wow, that's a simple one. If you were Chris Adams, it would be like a lot longer. Wow, look at that. or if you were Chris, it seems to be it's something to do with guys named Chris. Or if you were Chris Atkins, it would be something in Everywhere West.
Yes.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
Man, is that ever cool? That's a cool website.
Yes, thank you.
And tons and tons of parts and Union Switch and Signal and General Railroad Signal. So how long have you worked for the railroad?
September 6th of this year will be 25 years.
Holy mackerel.
Congratulations. That's a big number. That's great.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Are you going to be a 40-year man?
42 by the time that I can draw my railroad retirement.
Oh, really? Yeah, because you started when you were like 13 or something.
Well, I certainly liked trains when I was 13, but about a month out of high school.
Yeah, that's right. I remember. A month. Yeah. You were really, really young, and they hired you on and the whole 9 yards. And you've been working for CN the entire time, right?
Pretty much. I did prior to going, quote, full time for the railroad. I actually 17, 18 into my senior year, I worked the summers for a contract company that installed signals for a short line. But about a month after high school, went to work for, at that time, the Grand Trunk Western Railroad.
You're just an amazing guy. The two of you are like, I feel like I'm just like barely able to function compared to the two of you guys.
No, this is one of the best parts of this hobby is the people you meet, and I'm going to go to my grave saying that. But to meet Mike, I mean, this is something that's a legendary layout in the operating circles. Having seen hints and snips of it over the years in Model Railroader and in Rare Model Craftsman, I was just absolutely thrilled. And then what's interesting is that I think Facebook has opened the door to some of the more niche areas of modeling. And signaling certainly would count as some of that, certainly over the last 10 or 15 years. And as time goes on, it's going to become more common. But being able to talk to Mike through the internet and bounce ideas back and forth for me a couple times has been a huge advantage.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, just to admire the photography.
Oh, yeah.
It's all good stuff.
Yeah,
well, and
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
To Dave's point, early on we had a web page for the layout, and that required sitting down at the computer in the evening and spending some time to actually do updates. So needless to say, it did not get updated very often. But with the Facebook group page, literally I can sit on the couch and in 5 minutes I can post pictures of the latest and greatest work on the layout. So that's been a real enjoyment for me to be able to share that a little more real time with people.
So if for people don't know, it's on Facebook. It's the Chesapeake and Ohio Clifton Forge Division 1965 and HO scale. And it's a private group, but you've got you got 1,500 members. And I'm assuming it's pretty much just they contact you, and so long as it's not somebody asking for them to buy a cell phone in Nigeria, you pretty much take them, I guess.
Yep, pretty much. Anybody can find the group. You just gotta click to join there to be able to see the content.
Is there anywhere where someone might see a track plan of your? Well, there it is, there.
Yeah, if you go to the photo section. There's a couple track plans that I've posted several years ago.
I think I see the James River. I'm clicking on. All right. How about the James River sub? What is this one? It's a PDF. Oh, okay. That's something to do with. That's the actual line drawing or something.
Yep, CTC drawing.
Somebody else should be doing this interview. Dave, you got to take over.
No way. That's not how this works. That's not how this works. There's a lot to discuss and a lot of exciting things, that are all rolled into one here. It's a pleasure to be here.
I actually I was at the layout. I was saying to Mike that I was at his house just as he started the layout. Like just. And that was what, 2003 you said?
Yeah, I think when you were there, it was nothing but chalk marks on the floor.
I think so, yeah. And have you had a crew helping you, or has this been pretty much all your own, or what's the deal?
Oh, I've got some very, very talented friends that have helped me. And since it started in 2003, for one reason or another, career changes, people having to move other places, the group has manifested and changed. But I would say there's probably 5 guys that are very solid that help me with it. And, each of them are craftsmen in their own right. I do electrical all day for the railroad. So coming home and wiring the model railroad is not necessarily something that tends to get me excited. So, I've got a guy that's just a great wireman that I can kind of point at things and grunt, and he nods his head. And for some reason, he speaks fluent Mike, and the product turns out great. I've got another guy that's, a woodworker, and, I can explain to him, this is what we want to do with the bench work, and he just puts it all together. The area that I kind of keep locked down for myself, and it's actually the area I dislike the most, is the scenery. I really don't enjoy doing scenery. Everybody says it looks great, and I appreciate that, but scenery is not one of my favorite things. But I have a philosophy on scenery: consistently good or consistently bad. There's a lot to say about having consistent scenery on a model railroad. If things flow and the color textures and stuff work together, and it's not every time I turn a corner, it looks like somebody else did the scenery. There's a lot to be said about that continuity that gives you a feeling of traveling somewhere, because there's a commonality of what you're seeing.
That's a great point, actually, Dave. Continuity.
100%. That's a big deal.
Consistently good or consistently bad. Either one is good and is okay because it's consistent. That's a great point, because that's something you see with some club layouts where it's like,
Absolutely.
Joe did that and Sam did that part, and it just doesn't go. But yeah, that's consistently good or consistently bad is an excellent point. Because really, I've been to layouts where the fella obviously struggles with the scenery, not his favorite thing, and you can see where it's gotten better, or he might go back and do a part. But if it's the layout owner that did it all, and the layout runs really well and it's fun to operate, you soon forget that maybe it's not the best scenery in the world, but it's consistent.
Now you're telling my secrets, Lionel.
Which was? But your scenery, but going away from that, I mean, my God, your scenery is
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
You know, I find the same thing to be true with backdrops or even weathering. And Mike and I have talked about this when I was fortunate enough to be out there in this past fall and operate on Mike's railroad for the first time. Won't be the last, I'll tell you that. It was a great experience. And one of the things we both agree on is that without that consistency, you lose plausibility and rapidly. And I think consistent scenery, consistent weathering. You don't want too many exceptional weathering jobs because the plain Jane stuff is that's what you see when you go out there trackside. So the prototype really does set you up with what you need to be doing from a modeling standpoint if you allow it and you're patient with yourself to figure it out. But consistency is more important than exceptionalism every time.
Yes.
So who does the structures?
I've done some of them, the more simplistic ones, but almost all of the custom structures were either built by my friend Chris Wiley, who models the same section of railroad, but in scale. So he always laughs when he has to build a horribly oversized building for my layout. And then also William Bland, fellow Canadian there, Lionel, has built several structures for the layout.
Okay, where's William live?
I believe he's over in the Kitchener area.
Okay, I'm assuming. So who are these 4 or 5 guys? You better name them, because if they listen to this and you don't name them, they're going to be like hunting for bear.
Yeah, exactly. Might not come back. Well, Steve Brooks is my electrical guy. Bob Millhop is my jack of all trades. I don't think there's anything I can give him to do that he won't figure it out. Of course, Alan Bell, the gentleman that I partnered with our CTC parts business. Anything mechanical, Alan designed and machined the drop gates for the layout, which have proven to be extremely reliable. My friend Dustin has done a lot of the bench work. Those are kind of the core people. Of course, Chris, living in Virginia, he builds buildings and I get a box in the mail, or we meet up at a modeling meet and he hands me off a building. Those are probably the core guys, but I could probably list 24 more people that have had, a hand one way or another in helping. It's really a team effort, and I try to consciously refer to it as our layout and not my layout, because I really truly believe, it's as much theirs as it is mine.
So, see, that was a problem I always had. I was no good at having anybody else work on the layout because it was never going to be done the way I wanted. And so do you find, okay, you found 4 or 5 guys, and like you say, over the years, there's been a couple of guys come, a couple of guys leave just because of jobs and this and that and the next thing. Do you find it, are you kind of like a benevolent dictator? Like you're not really looking for suggestions? You're saying, hey, I need this, I need that?
Well, yes and no. I kind of phrase it this way. Everybody has a say in it, but at the end of the day, I'm the only one that has voting rights.
Yeah, I like that. Is that the way?
And
go ahead.
And I would like to point out, I feel very blessed because I've found, 5 guys that think very much so like I do, and they are craftsmen in their own rights. I mean, Alan's background is a mechanical engineer. Bob is an electrical engineer, used to work for Texas Instrument, designed integrated circuit chips. He's just a brilliant person. Steve works for the university, Michigan State University. He's basically the engineer that figures out all the heating and cooling and HVAC systems for all of their buildings. This is a group of engineering-minded people that are very much so into doing it right and quality of workmanship. And, I've never had to go back and say, no, I don't like this, it's wrong, or after they leave, rip something out. It's never been like that. So I've been very blessed, and it's not a situation that many people can find themselves in.
Yeah, having the right people involved is super critical. If you're going to have anybody involved, it's got to be the right people. Mm-hmm. And that's a sharp team of guys, and each one of them really is a name that's recognizable in the hobby for some of the contributions they've made.
Just before we leave the Facebook, I just wanted to go back. You were saying about how great it is to have a Facebook page and be able to update it super easy and all that. Dave, I was having a conversation on the porch at Crescent with one Tom Schmieder, and I was telling him. I wasn't actually telling him. I was more like demanding that he start.
That's good.
Yeah, when I was interviewing him, and he'll hear it when he's being because I was interviewing him with the portable recorder, and I was saying to him, you got to start a Facebook page. Every model railroader that has a layout or really just enjoys building models of any kind should have a Facebook page, because that way you get more interaction with people. I mean, if somebody stumbled across your page, Mike, I mean, honestly, sometimes I just kind of turn away because I'm thinking, oh my God, this layout is so spectacular. This is George Selios-esque quality.
Especially when you start to look at the operation and the electronics. I mean, one of the things that blew me away when I was out there, and it was fun. Mike and I have the same sort of giddy enthusiasm when it comes to some of the signal stuff, and to be able to, I know just enough to be dangerous, and he's an expert, so it works out really well. It's a crazy mix, but he's got a tower in his garage inside, a tower on his model railroad, complete with windows that work. You can watch model trains go by outside the window, and a subwoofer so that you feel it go by, and a full interlocking machine that actually operates this interlocking on the railroad in Lynchburg. It's unbelievable.
And this is in the garage.
It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen in model railroading, hands down.
It's in the garage?
In the garage.
Yeah.
Well, the interlocking machine weighs just under 2 tons, Lionel. I'm not sure my floor of the house would handle that, so yes, it's in the garage.
But
it's more prototypical that way anyway. It's perfect.
And there's a door to the garage. It's a dispatcher's office, and
it's a standalone building, Lionel. It's in the backyard.
Oh, is it?
It's not even close. Like, you go back there and you literally are the tower operator, and you might as well be in the real tower because it doesn't exist anymore. Well, it exists in the backyard. The trains that come by out the window are full size, and they sound like the full size ones too.
So so the trains that come,
it's incredible.
So the trains that come by the window, are they just kind of random, or
no?
When an actual train, when the guy's doing whatever he has to do, it correlates with a train on the layout.
Absolutely. So the model tower on the layout has a micro high definition camera in it, positioned to look out the tower window. And then that information is transmitted to the TV monitor, which is boxed in to look like you're looking outside a window in the tower. So, one of the first questions is, why go through the expense of high definition? Well, one of the requirements of a tower operator is to OS his trains, put the train on sheet. Well, to do that, you need to know what train it is. So I want it high definition, so when the engine rumbles across the diamond in front of the tower, you can clearly see the number boards on the locomotive to put that on your sheet.
Holy mackerel. I don't think I should ever come. This is a second layout I should never come to in person. I can't I can't go to Dave's, and I can't come to yours now.
Oh, you've got a standing invite.
Oh, I know that, but I don't know that. I don't think I can ever cash in on it, because I think I'd be like, who's this goober that you allowed in?
We've been talking a lot about scenery, and again, as I said, scenery is not exactly one of my favorite things to do.
How can you even say that? Your scenery is some of the best I've ever seen. Period. End of sentence. How does that even? That's like Dave saying he doesn't really like talking, but he does it anyways.
I don't know how to explain it. The signaling portion of it, I can sit down and write, a couple thousand lines of code in an evening, and there's no stress to it. It's almost mindless work for me, just because of what I do every day. But I sit down to do scenery, and I have to get hyper focused. I'll take pictures, of the area that I'm trying to do scenery in, and I'll clip them up on the fascia, and I start working from that. I just find it for myself, a stressful endeavor to try to recreate the scenes as I see them in the photos, and I get frustrated with it. So as the British would say, I crack on with it, but I can't, in all good conscience, say it's one of my favorite parts of model railroading. To me, it's a necessity of model railroading. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do is build this 3D miniature time machine. And to be able to accomplish that believably, I have to have scenery, and I have to have scenery that looks good. So for me, my real focus is not only the CTC operation, but the operation of the railroad, a miniature transportation company. And what did a train crew in 1965 actually have to go to from the time that they walked into the yard office and got their orders to the time that they climbed off that engine at the end of the run? And that, to me, is the real fun of it, is all of the elements, whether it be scenery, the CTC system, the window in the tower, the correct paperwork, the correct people doing, correct jobs, yard master, dispatcher, crew caller, whatever the case may be, and making all that plug in together in a seamless way, the way it would have been a day on the railroad.
So how did you end up picking Chesapeake, Ohio in 1965?
Well, my grandparents lived in Iron Gate, Virginia, and their neighbor happened to be the supervisor of signals for, at that time, Chessie System. And he hired in on the CNO in 48, right after the war, or shortly after the war. And, we would go out on a weekend and we would drive around, and he would show me signals, and he would explain how things worked. And he would talk about, back in 1952, we moved signal 563 off the holler down into the hill.
I love it. I love it. So cool.
And he just kind of instilled the legend of the CNO in my mind. That's about the best answer I can give. But
no, I think that's a great answer, because and this is something. Actually, we haven't really had a chance to talk about this stuff too much, Mike. The origins of a lot of this, but those childhood memories when you're there with your parents, and it's and there's just an opportunity to really just there's no responsibility. It's just the magic of it all. And when you've already got the awe built in of these railroads, and then someone lifts the cover off and shows you a little bit about how it works, it strokes all the right circuits. It's fantastic.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. That's a cool story.
It is a cool story, and it's coming back to me now. And didn't you have like a signal in your backyard of your parents' house and stuff?
Oh, several signals, including a caboose.
Did you have a caboose in your now I'm vaguely starting to remember that. I remember the signals, but I didn't remember the caboose.
So I'm going to embarrass myself for a second.
Okay.
No, you're just going to make the rest of us jealous.
Yeah.
So
I think it's great.
When I was 10 years old, that was about the time that the railroad was starting to get rid of cabooses. And I knew some of the guys that worked for the railroad there, and they happened to say as a joke, yeah, railroad's getting rid of cabooses and selling them for scrap. Probably get one for cheap. So I proceeded to ask my parents if I could have a caboose. And they actually checked into it. My parents were very supportive of my my passion. And it was just a little too pricey for them. And of course, 10-year-olds don't take no very well. So I pouted around the house for a day or two. Finally, my mom got frustrated, and she said, well, you write the railroad a letter, and if they'll sell it cheap, we'll consider it. So I sat down, and it took me about 3 days, and I wrote a letter and, basically said, I'm 10 years old. I really like trains, and I want a caboose to put in my backyard. And I put it in an envelope, and I mailed it off to CSX Railroad, Jacksonville, Florida. That's as much as I knew. About 3 weeks later, the phone rings, and I remember I was sitting there watching cartoons after school, and my mom answers the phone, and I'm kind of listening, and she goes, uh-huh, this is her. Uh-huh, uh-huh. You're gonna do what? Needless to say, CSX Transportation donated a caboose.
Wow.
And it sits in my parents' backyard, CNO caboose number 903674.
It's still there?
Still there.
That is amazing. That was back when CSX had people running it.
Yeah.
That's incredible. What a cool story.
So did they put it? Who paid to move it?
Well, that's another amazing story. So my mom had a friend that worked for the local newspaper, and they were talking, and my mom's friend thought that this was just a wonderful human interest story. So the little local paper did an article about the big railroad giving a 10-year-old a caboose. Well, the big papers in the area picked it up, and phone calls come in from all sorts of different companies saying, well, we'll give you the stone, we'll give you the ties, we'll give you the rails, we'll move it from the crossing to the house, we'll pick it up and set it on the track. And I think there was maybe 8 companies involved, and it all was donated.
So you got a free caboose.
Not only a free caboose, but it didn't cost my parents a thing to put it to the backyard.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible story.
You must have spent hours and hours and hours in that thing.
Oh, I lived out there. Other than in the winter months, in the summer, I lived out there. Even now, when I go home and visit the parents, I'll usually crash one night in the caboose for old time's sake.
Well, yeah, for sure. And then you live west of Detroit, and your parents were from that. Like, that's where you're from originally, right? The Detroit area.
No, actually, I grew up in the thumb of Michigan, a little town called Seaboyne on Saginaw Bay.
Okay.
Yeah, my graduating class was 37 people.
That's a small town.
A very small town.
But then because you right out of high school, Dave.
Right.
Right out of high school in 1997, 96, you got a job with the Canadian National Railway. Then you ended up moving down to Detroit area.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
And how did you and I met somehow through going to Doug Tagshold's layout or something like that? I don't forget how you and I met.
It was through Doug. Once I got moved down to this area, and got settled, I met some fellow modelers at the hobby shop. And really the best way to explain it is, my circle of friends expanded from there. And I will tell you, I actually just posted a little thing on the Facebook group, but, some of my best friends today are people I've met through the hobby. It's been so rewarding in so many different ways, above and beyond the physical aspects of building a model railroad. Just my circle of great friends.
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't be there.
That's what Dave and I talk about all the time is we are I don't know what's our mantra, Dave, or whatever the proper phrase is, that we want to build the camaraderie of model railroading. We want to make that grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, it's the people are really, as much as we all love trains, especially when you're into operations, which is something I definitely want to get into a little bit with Mike tonight. There's no such thing as a railroad that runs by itself. And it takes people. No matter how you look at it, it takes people. And finding the right people to be involved with your layout is really the difference between a lifelong hobby and the camaraderie and the fellowship that comes with that.
Yeah.
And losing interest, eventually moving on to something else.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's an excellent point. Yeah, if you don't have that camaraderie, you'll lose interest and move on to something else.
Yeah, you and I talk about that often as far as community and camaraderie and how important it is. And, being my mid-40s, young family, full-time work, finding the balance between obligations and community and the different forms of community, if it's volunteering locally or it's volunteering in the hobby. There's all different ways to sort of roll those things together. And but it's not an obvious path. It's not a clearly defined way forward. And so that's where having other people that you trust, especially in Mike's case, was such a huge layout that's so well done. Having somebody that you trust to help run the thing or clean the thing or get it ready for operating sessions. Having somebody that's willing to build some structures for you. Those are huge things that, you can return the favor. Like you said, Mike, you don't mind writing the code. But there's a lot of people who would rather do scenery than write code. So, there's all these opportunities. And I know that that's something that you've been involved with, especially with the small company that does, the CTC parts. It's such a neat idea. When I first saw Jerry Diedzik's and Ted Pamperin's, the little CTC machines they have for their parts of their railroads. I kept seeing this, CTCparts.com. It's like, who is this guy? It's like, of course, it's the guy that builds real CTC machines.
You dial that phone number and it'll ring my cell phone.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, don't everybody start calling him, or else he won't come back on the show.
Of course I will, Lionel.
But yeah, like Dave, my new example of that, my live example of that is I talk about the greatest thing about model railroading is you could have a guy like Josh Bowman, who is a fine young man, mid-30s, owns his own farm, has his own business, Josh's Ag Repair. He'll come anywhere to fix if you're in Iowa and you need a combine fixed, Josh is your guy. The travel expense might be a little bit out there, but Josh is your guy. But you can have a guy like Josh Bowman, fine young man, mid-30s, all about agriculture. That's his life, is agriculture. And you can have a guy like David Hyde that lives in Dallas, who's a French horn player in the Dallas Symphony Orchestra, and his wife is the violinist in the Dallas Symphony Orchestra. And if these two guys from complete opposite ends of the spectrum find a common ground, like they both like, Iowa Interstate Railroad. If these two guys find each other, they will become not only friends, they become lifelong close friends. That's the thing that just absolutely blows my mind about the camaraderie and the fellowship of model railroading.
It's incredible. It's such an opportunity for us all to be able to partake in that. And I think it makes everything about your hobby better, because it in and of itself is prototypical, working with other people. And at the operating session I was at with Mike, there was multiple people that he trusted with dispatching or with, running yards or providing advice on what sidings are a little too short or a little bit too long, and, where you might be able to duck in. Talking extensively with David Patch, who's a friend of mine for years as well. He's a reporter and lives in Ohio and is one of Mike's regular operators up there, and a very good dispatcher. Although I should probably leave it to Mike to claim that one way or the other. But
a great dispatcher,
and he's a character. He's a good photographer. He's a fellow Conrail aficionado. Just a really neat, caring human being, a good dude, and to be able to sort of sit up there and work with him on the dispatcher board and learn a little bit from him during that operating session meant a lot to me. It was a lot of fun.
This isn't the first place that this has ever been mentioned, but model railroading, I think, is one of the few hobbies out there that supports people with so many diverse talents coming together. A lot of hobbies, it's kind of the same talents that each person has doing, the same thing a little bit different. With model railroading, your focus could be nothing but wiring. And maybe that's all you like to do, and your buddy is just happy to let you do the wiring. This hobby supports that. Maybe you could care less about wiring, but woodworking and bench working is an interest of yours. Again, your buddy's happy to let you do that, and somebody else can do the wiring. But at the end of the day, everybody with all those different talents comes together for the operating session and enjoys it as a whole because of the components for which they contributed to.
That's a great point. That's another great point. Is you're right. It's diverse, so you can have people that really, you have your guys that love to weather cars, and you have your guys that, love to build track work, aka Kevin Marks. You can have all these people, and they can have very defined, diverse interests in the hobby, but they can all work together to create something. That's a very good point. Dave, you've been on the show multiple times, and I don't think you've ever come up with as many good points as Mike has tonight.
I agree. That's one of the reasons I was excited to talk to him. This is a guy I've looked up to for a long time in the hobby. I think he's accomplished a lot of the things that I hope to be able to accomplish someday with the OC. Signaling a prototype signal system was right there at the top, because that's what Mike and I grew up with. We grew up in the signal era where main lines had signals. They didn't have a depot. Maybe they had a tower, but what we really appreciate is the efficiency railroads were able to create because they basically essentially created capacity because they had signals.
Yep.
And it's dynamic, it's exciting. I think it offers all sorts of lessons about life in general. And trading stories with Mike is one of my favorite parts of getting together. It's a lot of fun.
And another point, just an aside, and then we'll let you talk about operations. We'll ask some basic questions, but another point, an aside, is Mike and I got to know each other pretty well through the Doug Tagshold and that whole group, and we even traveled by train to Salt Lake City, and then we just went, not drifted apart or went our separate ways, but literally before we started talking tonight, I don't think Mike and I have talked to each other in 20 years. And
I bet you it's been close to that.
Yeah, and we just started talking as if we had been talking to each other last week. And I mean, that's another great thing that the hobby brings to people is this endless supply of again, camaraderie.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And Dave, I have to say that I very much so admire the work that you've done. Your layout is extraordinary. It captures the prototype feel, and that's coming from somebody that literally is on the right of way every day of the week. Conrail is probably one of my favorite modern railroads, so that certainly helps. And if your fabulous book on signaling, how tattered it is, because how many times I've read it just for the sheer joy of reading some material that was wrote by a fellow modeler that understands it. I hope that shows that I really do respect the work that you've done, and your railroad is quite phenomenal in its own right.
It means the world to hear that from you, my friend. And it's the camaraderie that's brought it together. Trusting professionals to be professional and helping to bring people together. Letting experts be experts, so to speak. It's signaling and wiring is something that I'm learning as I go along. I've always admired it. I know the basics, but not the hardcore programming. And my friend Nick Anchant, a chance guy I met, when he was watching trains here, when he was going to Lehigh University years ago, he says, "Oh, I'm doing signaling for Ken McCory's railroad, and I'm helping, Steve Clay and a couple." And I was like, "Whoa, this kid, and he's 10 years, 12 years younger than me. So more than that, he just turned 30 a couple of years ago. He's probably 13 or 14 years younger than me. But in any case, he himself works in the field, and trusting experts to be experts like that is a huge reason why the Onondaga Cutoff has come as far as it has in the time that it's had. But I do appreciate the support and the enthusiasm. And again, so much fun trading stories, and it's just the best is yet to come. I really do believe that that's the case in the hobby.
A little bird told me that Mike's going to probably around the time, this will probably come out in like end of October, 1st November. A little bird told me that Mike's going to be paying a visit to the Onondaga Cutoff.
Oh man, am I excited to be part of that crowd.
Or will have paid a visit by this time.
I still can't believe I got that nod. I'm thrilled. Yeah, well, that's going to be fun.
Well, we've had that. Mike, Dave has a bit of a problem realizing that he's as talented as he is. So we'll have to work on that.
Absolutely. And is it October yet?
yeah, it's come and gone. I think so. Yeah. So hey, Mike, tell us what you thought of when you knew that this book was coming out. And did you even know Dave before the book came out?
I knew of him, but I hate to say it this way, Dave's going to think I'm a bit of a stalker, but it was only after the book come out and I, got a copy of it. I'm like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. That I kind of, did some research to find more out about Dave and, watched several of his live video streams there with his beautiful layout. And then I don't exactly remember how it come up, but all of a sudden in the conversation with Mr. Patch, I realized Dave knew Dave, and then before we knew it, we had a pro rail here in the Detroit area, and Dave was on his way to come operate with us. So,
that's very cool. We're gonna have this another discussion with the three of us after somewhere down the road after you've been to visit Dave's layout, because that'll be a whole different aspect that we can discuss. So when you started leafing through that book, like, you're probably thinking to yourself, because everybody, I know anyways, not everybody, but as your legend grows in the hobby, Mike, more and more people know of your story and how you work as a signal guy for CN, and we'll get into that more. But I mean, so when you got this book, were you kind of like, yeah, let's see what this guy knows? And as you started going through it, you went, holy mackerel.
Well, doing this professionally, my education is in signal engineering. I look at a lot of model railroad signal material with, one eyebrow raised. But Dave's book impressed me right off the bat, so he made brownie points with me pretty quickly.
So let's get to some basics here. How big is your layout?
Well, with the addition that was put on in what would that have been? 2016.
Right.
I guess it's right around 1,500 square feet.
So there was an addition put onto your house then?
Yep.
Wow, that must have been. What did you have to think about that for a while and find? Like, how big was the layout before you put the addition on? Like, as in like footage, like it was 20 by 30 kind of thing, or what was it that way?
35 by 28, roughly.
And then what was the size of the addition you put on?
The addition is the full width of the backside, so 35 by 17.
Okay. So you added, so then now you have a layout that's 35 by 42, basically, or 35 by 40.
Yeah, roughly.
Now, did you were primarily looking to increase the basement size. Did you bother putting anything on top of it, or did you just cover it with a tar roof or something and leave it at that? Or did you actually add a house on top of that?
Well, I did a couple things. Believe it or not, it's actually cheaper to add the house on top than it is to not add the house on top, which kind of surprised me in talking with the builder. So I moved the dispatcher's office into the new section, and I also moved the laundry from downstairs to the upstairs section.
Okay. All right.
So when the building inspector came, the upstairs section is defined as a closet. There's no windows. There's no point of egress other than the door to get to that room. And the building inspector's here, and it's just a shell of a room, and he's looking around, and he looks at his paperwork, and he looks at me with a squint, and he goes, "Closet, hey?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he looks at me and says, "Got a shoe problem?" Because it was such a big room.
That's a good one. I love it.
So really what we got here is, Mike, did you know that Dave has a licensing agreement with the Conrail Railroad, an actual licensing agreement with the full-size Conrail Railroad?
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
It should, because I think he might be the only guy in the world.
Well, we're doing Patreon things, and we're doing Facebook Live, and I just wanted to do it the right way, so I reached out to some contacts at Conrail, and it came together at the highest levels of the organization, which was really exciting.
So the point I was trying to make is we got one guy who's got an actual licensing agreement with a full-size railroad that exists, and another guy that added an addition to his house so that he could have a railroad in the bottom and a dispatcher's office on top.
We're certifiable crazy.
We are, and that's a discussion that you and I have had several times, Mike. We have yet to have it over beer, but I think we're going to fix that in October.
Absolutely.
When are all these discussions happening, and where am I?
We'll have a Molson in Lionel's honor.
There we go. More of a cider guy. I've been corrected on that before, Mike. Let me tell you.
No, that's okay. You can still have a Molson. The guy actually just down the one of the most famous beers in Canada is Molson Canadian, and just down the street, 4 doors down the street, on the other side of the street, Tim's father was the guy that invented Molson Canadian.
Oh wow!
No kidding. Yeah. That's kind of a cool story.
It's a very cool story. It's a very.
Has he been on the podcast?
No, because he's not interested in model railroading.
Well, all right. I guess that's fair enough.
Yeah, and Tim is kind of a one-word answer guy.
Oh yeah, that won't. That's not helpful either.
No, it's not really helpful. Which, by the way, none of the people at Crescent were one-word answer guys.
Does that surprise you?
Well, Rich is becoming used to Rich is becoming the whiz. Rich Winiski is becoming an integral part of the podcast. So, I mean, he always claims he's not interesting, which of course we all agree he's not. But I mean, Rich was talkative. Everybody was talkative. And guess who took the prize for the longest interview?
Heath.
Attaboy. There you go.
Yeah. My buddy Heath is he's an artist and a railroader, for what it's worth. He actually works in the stations department at NJ Transit with me, as one of the managing inspectors in the field. But he's a gifted amateur filmmaker and a very good writer. So he's an interesting person to talk to, and definitely, if there's somebody that could be more wordy than me in painting a picture, it's Heath.
Yeah. So the layout is roughly 35 by 40. Who designed the layout?
I did.
Okay. Was that a difficult process or pretty easy because you knew what you wanted?
Well, maybe a little of both. The general, flow of the layout, if you will, the linear design of it wasn't anything terribly challenging, at least not in my mind it wasn't. But what I found to be the most challenging is picking where the individual towns would go within that footprint. And I say that because I engineered it maybe a little bit from a reverse perspective. I engineered the bench work and then reverse engineered the model railroad to fit within the footprint of the bench work. And one thing I tried to do is, if there was a right-hand curve in this town, I tried to place that town where I had a right-hand curve naturally on the model railroad. So that part was a little bit challenging.
I love that, though. And I think, I'm not intimately familiar with the route, but I've been down there enough times to recognize a couple of those scenes because of those turns. And that's actually in my little basement, which is not big enough to do what Mike did. That's the reason the Onondaga Cutoff is a freelanced route on a prototype railroad, because I couldn't fit the right curves in. And to me, East Syracuse and CP285 and CP286 are not going to look like those interlockings if they're curved the wrong way or if they're 3 feet long when they should be 8 or 10 feet long.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I love about what you've done, Mike, is that you included stuff that made sense and you did it in a way that's plausible. I mean, it really is. It shows how much passion you have for it. It's a wonderful reflection of how much effort you put into things.
Colored chalk helped a lot. I chalked the entire, chalked the bench work out in one color, actually measured everything, and then started to chalk, the basic track plan of, I have the correct curve here, so this is going to be where the siding starts for Gilmore Mills. I have the length I need on this particular peninsula with the straightaway, so this is going to be Eagle Rock. But getting it all chalked out on the floor was a very easy and simple way for me to visualize it and somewhat put it into a full scale perspective.
Did you have any influences? Because I'm looking at the photos, you've got good wide aisles. It's very well finished. Did you have influences as to the height of the bench work, the width of the aisles, and that sort of thing?
Well, so this is a hotly debated topic of how high should a model railroad be, and if you're a double deck railroad such as mine, what's the distance between the decks? And I don't think there's a right answer to that, Lionel. I think a lot is dictated by the height of the layout builder. I'm 6'1", so my lower deck hangs right around 36 inches off the floor, with the upper deck at 59 inches off the floor. But somebody who's taller or shorter than me, those might not be comfortable heights. Aisle width, is there such a thing as too wide aisles in model railroading? Probably not, but it's it's a give and take. I want aisle width, but to do that I got to sacrifice bench work width. If I want bench work width, I'm going to sacrifice aisle space. So there's a lot of playing around with those kind of things, and where you can sacrifice and get wider aisles, you do it, and where you got to pinch it down just a little bit to make the scene right, well, you take that into consideration, and hopefully it's an area where is not a place where people have to congregate and stuff. And if it is, then back to the drawing board you go. So for the most part, except one small spot at Clifton Forge where the locomotive servicing facility bows out into the aisle, none of the aisles ever get narrower than 36 inches. And in most cases, they're, 45 to 50 inches.
You must have noticed, and Dave, it seems like it's a very well appointed layout. Like you must have noticed that when you were there, eh?
Oh, 100%. I mean, and it's, the way he's got it set up, it's comfortable. There's a nice thick rug on the floor. Although, my gosh, I don't know how you find Katie coupler springs down there, Mike. You must have a good supply of those.
Yep.
But it's a comfortable place to operate. It's well set up. Staircases are wide, unlike my railroad here. My fascination with old houses is it's not necessarily conducive to a successful model railroad without some careful planning as it goes. But when you go to Mike's, it's beautiful. I mean, you walk downstairs and you're on the C&O. You can feel it. There's an energy to that space where it is a time machine. And you get lost. You get lost with your train on this railroad, and I don't know. I mean, it's a little slice of heaven in a basement. It's wonderful.
Mike, when you go to Dave's, it's kind of like going to the Keebler Elf Cookie Factory, the tree.
I don't know whether to love that or but all right. Yep. We've heard this.
So it's like it's very.
Mike, give me a little bit of don't laugh quite that hard.
Oh, I'm just thinking where I can get a Keebler Elf hat.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
So the first time work out all right. The first time I was ever there. So I'm thinking, okay, it's going to be, it's exciting to be at Dave's place and to see the layout and everything. And it's a beautiful old home that used to be a grist mill. And, Dave was an avid model railroader before he bought the house. So what he did was he looked for the house with the most difficult basement to build a model railroad in.
Wow.
I would have loved to have been there. I would have been like tapping him on the shoulder going, no, Dave, no.
But I love old houses, and this is the cost.
Well, and it's a beautiful home. It's a very old home, and you go in and like the bathroom door is a wood door, and you open up the basement door. You go make a hard right hand turn at the kitchen, and then you go down this stairway, and because it's an old grist mill, the foundation is like one of those 1.5 foot wide rock cement foundations. And as you're going down there, you realize you kind of it feels like you got to kind of turn and crook your neck a little bit and work your way down the stairs. And then you turn right. And all of a sudden, there it is. And it's like literally like you're thinking to yourself, how do they make so many cookies in that Keebler Elf tree? and then when you see the layout, you're thinking, how the heck did he build this magnificent layout in this Keebler Elf tree? And that's exactly what it's like.
I'd like to know how he got the plywood down there.
I know. I would like to know that too. I think there's another door somewhere that's been removed or something, or it's magic. I think it's magic, to be honest with you.
That's it.
No, there is a back door that goes out to the backyard, so that's how the majority of the stuff got in. It's not enough magic. If there was magic, the main line would be 3 times as long. That's what I wish I could do. But it's a lot of fun. And Mike said it before, there's the diversity in model railroading, the ways that different guys put a layout in a space is in and of itself awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the fun of the hobby is, visiting layouts and finding out how people have done things so well. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're getting ready to start a model railroad and you haven't looked up your local model railroad club or tried to hook up with other modelers in the area and see what other people are doing, you're doing yourself a disservice. I
agree. It's an old hobby, and a lot of this stuff has been done poorly. A lot of this stuff has been done, in a haphazard way with people learning as they go, myself included. And those lessons are out there to be learned. So again, reach out to the club, write to the magazines, right? These now, in this modern age, you can drop an email to Otto Vondrack. You can drop an email to Eric White, and or their staffers, and somebody will eventually get back to you, and it helps answer questions that you might have, which I think it just adds to the enjoyment of the hobby. Time and again.
Or there's so many Facebook pages to follow of layouts like Tom Jacobs and his Crossline, and Mike Adams and his New Haven, and Chris Atkins and his Everything's West of here. And just there's so many. And Mike Burgett's Chesapeake in Ohio, 1965, Clifton Forge Division. There's just so many great examples that we never had before of just things to look at. Like anybody that would look at your layout, Mike, they would be inspired by how the room is finished. Which is funny because when I built my layout, built my home and my layout room, somehow I had gone to a convention in the Detroit area, and there was a guy who had finished his layout room very similar to yours, where it was fit and finished. It was just a beautiful place to be. And I thought to myself, man, when I get my chance, I am building a room. And that's what I did. I built a really nice room, and the layout was, in this beautiful room. And it just was so much fun to have it like that. So, I mean, that's another thing. They can look at your photos and be inspired by that. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Well, I think the finished room does multiple things. One, it's all about the presentation. You buy a new car or you go to the lot to look for a new car, and, they're all waxed and polished, not covered in mud. It's all about the presentation. And to be quite frank, I probably spend more time in my basement than I do any other place in the house. So I wanted it to be comfortable. It's my man cave, if you will. And it just, I didn't want to feel like I was going to a basement.
Yeah, exactly. I got a question for you, Mike, before we get out, and then we'll do operations. You got your operations questions ready there, Dave?
Yes, sir.
All right. Before we go to that, I got a question for you, Mike, and this is a question I love to ask people that are as enthusiastic about the hobby as you are. What is it about this hobby that makes it so popular with the people that enjoy it? Like, what is it about trains? What is it? This hobby, for years, people would talk about the hobbies dying and this and that. And I don't even have that discussion anymore because, as far as I'm concerned, the model railroading is younger than you think. But what is it about trains and model railroading that draws people to it?
Well, I'll answer that in two parts. So the train part, I think generally, people, young boys, get fascinated with anything that's loud, big, and moves. And trains certainly fall in that category. I think there's a subconscious element there of where did it come from, where is it going, and what's on it. So there's a curiosity around railroading. And I think you put all those elements together, and it just makes for a perfect storm of satisfying so many different elements of our senses. The model railroading end of it, at least for me, and I imagine it's different for everybody else, it's the enjoyment and the challenge of trying to recreate what I see either, in the real world or in photos in a miniature 3D form. I'm young enough, I never actually saw the C&O. I can vaguely remember as a child once in a while seeing a C&O locomotive that hadn't quite been repainted yet into the CSX paint scheme, but I never had any tangible experience with the C&O. So for me, modeling is a way to have a tangible 3D experience with it.
Yeah, and one other good question I think I'm going to ask you, because I see that you use NCE for your control system.
CVP.
Oh, really?
Yep, oh. CVP Easy DCC.
Oh, and how did you end up on that? Do you remember?
I actually got my first system from you, if you remember.
Oh, okay. And how did that go?
Well, I chose it because...
I love it. That's greght. Lionel, you have not heard that one before on the podcast, if I may be so bold.
No, that's true. Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, Lionel, if you recall, myself, Bruce Carpenter, Doug Taxel, we were over at your house operating on your railroad, and I was just about to the point to get started, and we were talking about DCC systems, and Bruce and Doug were at that time CVP users, and I was familiar with the system from operating at their layouts. So first off, my thoughts were I'm familiar with it. Yes, I like it. I like the feel of the throttles in my hand. Plus, I've got two good friends here that can certainly answer questions and help get me started. And about 3/4 of the way through that discussion line, I was like, I got a system you can have. So as they say, the rest is history.
I guess I had gotten it to review or something for Combine.
I believe so.
Yeah, well, there you go. And so I have some roots in the Clifton Forge Division. Wow.
Somehow I'm not surprised.
You do.
That's cool. Now I just got to come over there and figure out how to operate it. I wonder how the review went. I should look it up.
Yeah.
I must have been a good review because he ended up taking it or something.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you another question. I can't remember what it was. Oh, well. I liked what you said about where does it come from and where does it go? Because I've often said the CP main line is about a mile from my house, and there's this one section where if I go rail fanning off to the right, the tracks turn and disappear into the woods. And I'm thinking that's part of the magic of railroading is where does it come from and where does it go? That's a perfect analogy. And again, back to my visit with Dave at Creston, and there I was. That ledge where we were at the ledge at Bennington, Dave.
Oh yeah,
that was unbelievable. Like I'm thinking to myself, I remember finally I got a turn to stand on the ledge, and it's like basically the train passes right under you almost. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Bennington Curve, the rock there at Bennington Curve. Yeah, that's a great thing, and this is something that the rail fan community should be aware of, is that there's new ownership now at the Station Inn. It's passed on to someone of my and Mike's generation, and it's open for business. So they have a website at stationinpa.com, and if you have not been to see what Norfolk Southern is up to on the former PRR, yeah, it's a different world than it was a few years ago, but it is still 100% worth your time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's Station Inn. What is it?
Stationinpa.com.
Yeah. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. And Rich Winiski basically looked after me that weekend. When we
Did you need somebody to look after you?
Apparently I did, because Rich did a hell of a good job. When we went out to the Horseshoe Curve, we had to hike up this big hill, and which was no problem. Well, you drove, and then we hiked up the big hill. I guess I must have said something like I had a little bit wobbly legs, so we used my car, but you drove, and then Rich kept looking back. Okay, and he had this chair. We get to the top of the hill, and he's got a chair, and I had mumbled somewhere along the line. I thought, I should have brought a camping chair too. So we get to the top of the hill. We get this spectacular view of a Horseshoe Curve, and Rich has got his chair, and then he goes, and then I said, he went to clear some brush or something, and I said, Rich, do you mind if I sit in your chair? And he's like, no, you sit there, So I got to use his chair the whole time we were there, and then he goes, you want a sandwich? He had a sandwich for me. He had water for me. It was like, and then we went over to Bennington. And he was like this. I had his chair over there. I had the best deal. It was like Rich just took me under, looked after me so well.
Rich is a wonderful guy, absolutely wonderful guy, and I'm happy to have him as one of the wisdom keepers, one of the regular contributors here on the Onondaga Cutoff. He's a railroader as well, and has made the OC a much more prototype experience, which is a lot of fun.
So, Mike,
definitely helps with the time aspect.
I hope when you were there, you searched out Rich Winiski and made friends with him, because he's a guy that would love to come and operate your layout, and he's just a wonderful gentleman. That's what Rich is. He's a wonderful gentleman. That's people be looking at him going like, "Why are you hanging out with Strang?"
Well, we all need a little spice in life.
Yeah. His mother, he'd be the kid when I was 10. His mother'd be going, "You're not hanging out with that Strang boy again, are you?" All right, Dave. So what did you want to talk to Mike about operations?
Well, operations, Mike. So let's walk everyone through, how many people are operating, what are some of the roles, And I would love to talk about the way you do your job briefing, both for guest sessions and for regular sessions. So let's start with some of the basics. How many people do you have for an operating session on your railroad?
Well, I played around with that number, and 14 seems to be about the perfect number.
Excellent. And does that include your dispatchers and your managers, or is that just operators?
That includes everybody but myself.
Yeah, and you find that a few more can be too much quickly, or is less better?
Less is definitely better. And on those rare occasions when we can't, fill 14 positions, then I just smile and shrug my shoulders and say, well, fellas, the mines are on strike today.
There you go. Hold them for the crews.
Yeah, and we run just a few less coal trains.
And that's one of the things when I was there that I really appreciated was that's what the prototype would do as well. There's no reason to push the envelope if you don't have enough people to do it. And that's exactly what the prototype does.
I will tell you, some of my best operating sessions have been with a smaller crew than a larger crew.
I agree with that. And I found that on the Onondaga Cutoff as well, especially when you have people that are qualified that really know the railroad well. They're able to kind of roll with the punches a little bit. And as far as, operators go, it is, I know Dave Patch is a regular dispatcher after I was there. Are there other people that regularly dispatch, or you have a seniority list with that?
We have two regular dispatchers, Dave Patch and Bob Millhop. And they'll switch back and forth depending on, if Dave's in the mood to run trains. Dave's our official chief dispatcher, so he always gets first dibs on it. But those are my two regular dispatchers. I have another gentleman that occasionally will dispatch. But that's one of those jobs where you really got to qualify to do it. It's the one singular job that touches every aspect of the railroad. So that's not a job where somebody who's never done it before is going to sit down and do it, because everybody's enjoyment suffers when you have a bad dispatcher. Just like everybody's day is ruined on the big railroad when we have a bad dispatcher on the board. So
yeah, I agree with that. Now, how do you coach that? Do you find that people are eager to try it, and is there a formal program for qualifying, or is that something that you kind of feel through as you go?
Well, it depends on the individual. I've got a couple guys that have expressed interest, and their interest of model railroading is the nitty gritty operations, the paperwork, the procedures, if you will, of getting a train from point A to point B. And we do follow somewhat of a formal procedure where, for at least 2 operating sessions, you're going to get shadowed by one of the regular dispatchers. And depending on how quick you catch on, we'll determine at what point we'll let you take the boards yourself and use your own initials instead of student initials. And then you have other people that wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole that, they want to run trains or they want to be in the yard. That's one thing I can say with a regular crew. Everybody kind of finds their niche, and they all just seem to be happy to do the same thing month after month after month. It's kind of surprising. I wasn't expecting that. I figured people want to move around a little more, but with my regular crew, it's pretty consistent of who's going to take which jobs.
Yeah, I think that's great. That helps with some of the camaraderie, and I think there's a lot to be said for the qualification procedures that you're talking about. That's something, obviously, we all do that on the real railroads. Those of us that are railroaders, you're not allowed to touch really any of that. Locomotive engineer, conductor, any of the block operators, dispatchers, unless you've got, you're qualified, which means you've memorized the physical characteristics of the railroad and passed an exam on it. And yeah, I think that's great. And how big is the pool of people you draw from? It's 14 for the optimal session.
Oh, I send out the total pool is probably 40 plus people.
Yep. Okay.
But I do it in 2 emails. So there's an A-team email, which goes to the core group, which are the guys that come and work on the layout, type of thing. They always get first dibs. And if I can't fill the 14 slots from the A group, then I send an email out to the B group.
Okay. That's you're not the only one that does that. I think there's a lot to be said for that rewards people that invest extra time and effort too, which is nice. And then also helps ensure that they have a good time when you have the B-list crew that fill things in. So
Yep,
you can still have your
absolutely.
session.
When Dave's layout, I would probably says what? Probably 70% the size of Mike's. What'd you say? He's 40 by 35. You're
I'm about I would say a little bit more than half, maybe 60% the size of Mike's.
okay. So so Dave's theory on crew size is he can jam. He jams 14 or 15 people in there and goes, I think I can get a couple more in here whether I need them or not.
It is a moving target. There's no, even with the A list and the B list, which is something that I do now as well. There's always someone that marks off last minute. There's always, something comes up, somebody got sick, somebody's kids. I've got a lot of friends that operate here and they have kids. So there's a lot of moving parts, but trying to do our best. That
just reminded me, Dave. I wanted to be on the email list. I haven't got any emails about the Onondaga cutoff.
That's because I haven't sent anything yet for this fall.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe I must ask you before or after. Okay. You don't operate. Do you operate in the summer, Mike? Like before COVID? Forget COVID. Now you're getting back to normal. Do you operate every month of the year?
No.
My
operating season starts in October and runs until May. So
8 months.
June, July, August, September, I don't operate for a multitude of reasons. One, it's very hard to get the group together with all the summer activities and stuff that everybody has. I volunteer at a local museum in the area, and I spend a pretty good amount of time there on the weekends in the summer. And then it also gives me about a 4-month period that I can rip into larger scale projects on the model railroad, such as, a big ballasting project or scenery project, that requires you not only to clean up the layout, but, scrub the glue off the track and all of that. And when you're talking, essentially a month between operating sessions to restage the railroad, put all the paperwork together for the next session, and then actually try to start some sort of scenery project and have it cleaned back up, it's not worth the stress. So I do my construction of the layout over that summer period, and then pretty much, the free time between each monthly operating session is spent getting ready for the next session or inevitably making repairs to something. No matter how good your model railroad is, there's always going to be that sticky switch. There's always going to be that locomotive that needs to be looked at, or that freight car that, as Dave said, the Katie's somewhere in the shag of the carpet, never to be seen again. So that's kind of how I work it, and it works out for me.
Do you remember him, Dave?
Yes.
Yeah, he played for the Dodgers, the Brooklyn Dodgers. Shortstop, sticky switch. His first name was really Fred, but he was so good at tracking down grounders and worked the infield so well. His nickname was Sticky. They called him Sticky Switch.
And I think just like on the prototype, how many times is a switch failure caused by a point that needs to be lubricated?
Oh yeah,
that's one of the things I love. And when you do get to Mike's, like, one of the great parts of what he's done is that some of that prototype stuff is built right in, and you have to call the dispatcher when there's a rock. If you read the paperwork, there's you got to look out for rock slides in a certain part of the railroad, and it's a really neat adaptation with some of the stuff that the prototype has to do. That because Mike and I are railroaders, you see it in real life, and it's something you keep an eye out for in operations too. But now it's a great operation, Mike, and it was a lot of fun to participate, and we'll be doing that again sooner than later.
Seriously, I come up with a viable story for a guy named Sticky Switch, and that's all I get. I barely get. You barely even recognize it and keep on moving.
Yeah, we laughed. We thought it was great.
Lionel, we know you too well.
So okay,
try.
What's that?
It was a good try.
It was a great one. Are you kidding?
They gave it the old college try.
That one was back into the corner. That was a stand-up triple. That one. You couldn't come up with that if your pants were on fire. You couldn't come up with that.
That's correct. That's why I didn't get it.
Yeah. So 8 operating sessions a year, then basically.
Probably a few more in that, because usually there's at least 2 guest operating sessions, if not 3 or 4 within that operating period.
And do you have some sort of way of qualifying guest operating sessions, like who you'd like to, because I mean, that was always something I struggled with, because there was invariably some club or something would want to bring a group of people by, and there'd be like one guy that had absolutely no idea what he was doing, and you'd really wish he wasn't even in your house.
Well, I will tell you, if you think your model railroad is going to operate the way that you envision it, or the way it operates with your regular when you have a guest crew, you will be very, very disappointed. Guest operations, you kind of have to set aside some of your hopes and expectations. I don't compromise on how we operate, but at the same time, nobody's going to show up to your house and know the railroad to the same degree that you know it or your regulars know it, and no amount of job briefing is going to close that gap. It just becomes sensory overload. So I generally, with guest groups, I'll have maybe 4 of my regulars to be the question and answer man. If somebody feels more comfortable, doing their first run with what we would call a pilot, then one of my regulars will pilot them. I'll have one of my dispatchers there to run the railroad, but if a guest wants to sit down, he's there to answer the questions and assist them in how the CTC machine operates. So that's how we kind of handle, guest operations.
Have you ever had a guy there from New Jersey that wouldn't leave the dispatcher alone?
Yeah. Yeah. He looked like a Keebler elf.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm sorry, Dave. I couldn't help myself.
No, it's all right. It's honesty is important. We strive for transparency here on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I got a great question for you, Mike. And I mean, Dave, jump in on this one. I'm sure I've asked you before, but Mike, you're the perfect age. I mean, you've been an avid model railroader since you could walk. So, what do you think about the massive change in the products and that are available today, as say to when you were 20, when you started, when you got really, or when you were 18, when you were really serious about building models and things like that? How are you like kind of blown away at the quality of the products that are available now?
Oh goodness, even just in the time frame that I've built the layout, which is now going on 18, 19 years. And I think back to 03, 04 when I first started. I mean, there are things on my railroad which I will hold secretive that I look at and I go, that is very dated for where we're at with model railroading. And you should never be afraid to push your model railroad to a higher place when the time is right. So here's a good example. The first, we'll say 8 years of building the model railroad, my focus was to get the upper level going and be able to have small operating sessions just over the upper level. So of course, to that end, locomotives were equipped with DCC. At that time, sound was just barely coming on board, and it, to me, wasn't anything special or of high quality. So we just went with non-sound decoders. That was still considered the high-tech way to go back then. A lot of people still had rotary block systems. Fast forward another 5-6 years, we ripped all those decoders out and we put in, sound decoders. Fast forward to about 4 years ago, I ripped all those sound decoders out to go to a new version of sound decoders that just provided a much better sound quality. I just recently, just before COVID hit, dropped a lot of money in completely upgrading the DCC system, all, the newest, latest, greatest throttles and stuff. And there's been a couple spots on the model railroad where the scenery's been redone about 3 times for a multitude of reasons. So keeping up with where model railroading is going, I think, is important. And you shouldn't think that, okay, I've got all my engines DCC equipped. I'll never have to touch that again. If you think that way, your model railroad will become very dated very quickly. And I think you'll lose some enjoyment knowing what's out there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you got to keep with it and keep, What about you, Dave? Do you constantly upgrade your equipment too?
I constantly repair things that break. At this point, I'm still far enough from completion that finances for the layout are dumped into completing the layout. So rounding out the roster, upgrading freight cars, and finishing the scenery on the backside. Also with the new Patreon channel that I've been doing, like I'm recording a lot of these projects, so it does take longer to get stuff done than it did before. But I definitely, absolutely agree. I mean, I did get rid of all the QSI sound decoders because they were awful. And as time has gone on, I've been able to upgrade enough locomotives with sound, modern sound, that at this point, every consist at least has a sound leader and a sound trailer. So that basically every train that leads will be led with a locomotive with sound and with at least one other one in the consist. And that's been a long, ongoing process. It does take time and money. But Mike's right. Sound started out and it was very chintzy, very tinny. Modern sound is not like that. And you go to some of these upgraded speakers. I'm not sure, Mike, if you've played with any of these, the newest ones that have come out that I've been fascinated with have been the Scale sound systems.
Mm-hmm.
That fella JT that has that website. I never thought that the physics inside of a tiny speaker could matter as much as they do. So now I wish that I had those speakers for all my engines, and as we go through, I'll be upgrading those one by one as well. But yeah, you have to keep it fresh. If you don't, again, the real railroads are always changing too. You have to keep pushing.
Yeah. So speaking of finishing layouts, Mike, how far away are you from finishing yours, do you think?
I think if I put in a good solid effort in a year, it's going to be as done as any model railroad can be. I suppose there's always things that I may decide to go back and, tweak a little bit. But, I'm ballasting the last little section of the yard at Clifton Forge. I figure I'm down to maybe needing 3 more boxes of super trees. And I've got a couple dirt roads I gotta finish up to, change them from painted plaster to actually have an aggregate on them. And other than that, and stringing some more wire on telephone poles, we're getting down to where certain elements of the hobby are being boxed up. My supplies to build buildings and bridges and stuff, there's just not a need for it anymore. And I have mixed emotions about that. I am looking forward to it slowing down a bit. It has been a huge part of my life and my time for 18 years now. And I am the type of person that I always like to see light at the end of the tunnel, a point of completion. But I'm also looking, forward to some other elements of the hobby that have taken a back door because of the amount of time that I've spent constructing the railroad, namely, writing some more articles for the hobby press, maybe doing some more presentations at the MMRA conventions and things like that. So
that'd be cool. That'd be cool if you started writing. I mean, there's plenty to write about. I mean, my goodness. And most of the photos on your Facebook page, I'm assuming they're taken with your phone.
They are taken with a phone. Most of the photos on the Facebook page, the quality ones, are actually done by quote unquote our company photographer Craig Wilson, who just has a rail fan's eye for model railroad photography. And then almost all of the, I'll call them action shots, progress shots. This is what I worked on tonight. This is what we're doing right now. Yeah, those are just snapped with my iPhone 8 Plus.
Do you hear that, Tom Schmieder? He just uses his phone. That's all he's got to do. He has a Facebook page, takes a couple of pictures. I told Tom, I said, once a week. That's all you got to do is post like once a week. And people will start following you and get involved. And I said, Dave, I said to him, and it will encourage him to keep going. It's a one way of getting motivation.
I agree. Sharing this hobby is really one of the unique pleasures of it. and that is absolutely where I think social media and the internet have really just opened your eyes to the fact that there's other people out there doing signals. There's other people out there looking at, consistency in scenery or consistency in weathering, like we talked about, early tonight. So now it's very exciting, Mike, and I'm looking forward to your writing. The stuff that you have put together has been some of my favorites as well. So it's kindred souls doing kindred soul stuff, my brother. It's good stuff.
Absolutely.
What was the last article you had published, just so people know where to go looking?
Oh, goodness. Well, probably model railroad planning. Oh, I'd have to look it up, Lionel, but it was the article on herniating the helix.
2021?
No, it'd been probably 2017, 2018, maybe.
Wow. Well, yeah. So it's time for you to get putting pencil to paper and start writing some more stuff.
Well, positive train control slowed me down on many aspects of my life, but you're absolutely correct. So another year to finish up the layout, at least finish to the point that I'm going to call it finished, in getting back to some of these other aspects of the hobby that I enjoy, is exciting for me.
Yeah, that's no big deal, Dave? I know most people that have layouts that are 35 by 40 are pretty much finished by the time they're in their mid 40s.
Yeah, right.
Holy moly.
Like I said, I do like to see a light at the end of the tunnel.
It's a labor of love, without a doubt.
So let's, we haven't really, just briefly, what is it you do for a living full time exactly?
I am the Division Engineering Manager of Signals and Communications for Canadian National's Michigan Division, which essentially is our trackage that runs from Chicago to Pittsburgh.
Holy mackerel. So are you basically on the road all the time?
Oh, it varies by week to week, depending on what's going on. But yes, there is a lot of on-the-road time to be able to get to all the different points on my division and touch base with my supervisory staff and the unionized staff.
Yes. Run that title by me again. You are the
Division Engineering Manager of Signals and Communications.
Holy mackerel. Do you know a guy that runs stations? I know a guy that runs stations for a railroad too.
Yeah.
Wow.
You can't trust those facilities, guys, though.
No.
Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. The two of you could sit down and you guys should be on a podcast or something.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Maybe someday.
After we're going to do this again after the new year or something. We'll talk about your visit to Dave's because it'll be interesting to hear because I know you'll have fun. That's for sure. Just when he thinks, when there's 32 people down there and he thinks, yeah, I can pack in a couple more in here.
Well, what I'm really wondering is exactly with what and how much do I have to bribe Dave to get to dispatch?
Well, there you go.
Well, that process is already underway, as it were, because I had that privilege on your railroad as well.
Oh, you got to dispatch on his railroad?
I did. Thanks to a very lucky draw of number one.
A very lucky draw.
Okay, so that's how you do it for guests, is you kind of, everybody picks a number and then they get to pick a job?
Yeah.
And somebody must have been supervising you, weren't they, Dave?
Oh, yeah, that was Dave Patch.
Right. Okay.
That was Dave Patch, who's a friend of mine from, over years at this point. And, another kindred soul on the long road of life. Somebody that really has a lot to offer and has had some challenges that he's overcome, and just a really good gentleman, good guy, smart guy, and a great person to learn from. So it was a great choice on Mike's part to have him up there to mentor me, because, I'm one of those guys that likes to run trains. And when I drew number one, I was like, well, I think I want to run. And Mike's like, no, you're going to dispatch with number one. And so upstairs I went, and it worked out great. I mean, it was an honor and just awesome, because it's like being in a dispatcher's office. It smells like it. It's got the parquet floor. It looks like it. It sounds like it. It's fantastic.
So why would you choose a guy that's in charge of escalators to be a dispatcher?
I thought he needed to broaden his horizons.
Oh, okay.
And I appreciate wisdom, and that's a wise statement by a wise person.
Okay. I think we pretty much covered everything. Where's your office that you work out of, Mike?
I'm out of the administration building at Pontiac, Michigan, there in Johnson Yard.
Okay, so not very far from. What's that? Like a 30-minute drive from your house?
I live 6 miles from the office.
Wow,
Bonus.
you got it up.
Yep. So when they call for a foot of snow, I just go, eh.
So that when you bought the house, you weren't that guy. So that was just as. But you did. But were you already working out of Pontiac, Michigan when you bought the house?
Yeah, I was the signal maintainer at Pontiac for 11 years before I went into management.
Okay. And how do you like? Okay, so what has happened? Oh, that's the last question I wanted to ask you. How do you feel like? Do you feel like social media has just completely broadened the scope and the enjoyment of having the layout because so many people can participate, even if it's just through Facebook?
Well, social media is what you make of it. You can choose to let it dominate your life. You can choose to let it be a rewarding part of your life, and I've found it to be very rewarding in a lot of ways. It's for me again a convenient way to be able to show people, almost real time what I'm working on the model railroad. But it's been such a tool too. I mean, there's a lot of times I'll post things on the Facebook group. Most recently, I was building yard light towers for Clifton Forge, and I get on the internet doing some searches. I just could not find, an LED spotlight that I thought looked correct in scale and just that I was pleased with. So I just posted a little snippet there. Working on these yard lights. Here's a prototype photo. Here's the model. Anybody got any suggestions of LED lights that I can use to illuminate these? And I must have gotten a dozen responses, and one of them was a link, and it's like, holy cow, that's exactly what I need. And 20 years ago wouldn't have been able to do that, and maybe wouldn't even known that company existed. And to me, that's huge to just be able to throw a question out there and get so many different responses and perspectives, and to lead you in a direction that you never would have went on your own.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having an encyclopedia of model railroading right there. Or you could have a podcast that you listen to while you're driving around.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you've listened to all the episodes and some of them twice.
Or 3 times.
How cool is this that we got to talk again after all these years?
Very cool.
Very cool. Very, very cool. What do you think, Dave? How did that go?
I think it was fantastic. It's exactly what I hoped would happen. And, based on conversations I've had with Mike over the last couple of years, and most recently in person there out this last fall, it was exactly the way I hoped it would go. Really informative, and really do appreciate your time, Mike, as a managing railroader. I understand the pressures of that. And making this happen is a big deal. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It was quite the honor to be on here with you guys, and I certainly would be happy to do it again anytime.
Perfect. Dave, you want to try giving out the email address?
I always screw that up.
You do. Yeah, absolutely. It's 1L like Abelese.
Right. And it's always the 2. I should really think of some 2 L's ahead of time.
Sure. Absolutely.
And it's like, like double crossbar utility. There's a stretch for you. There's 2 L's in that one. But it's Modeler's Life with 1 L, like Abelese, not 2 L's, like double crossbar utility, at gmail.com.
Yeah, there you go. Or how about this? 1 L, it's Modeler's Life at gmail.com. That's Modelers with 1 L, like Abelese, not 2 L's like Raritan Valley.
Oh, I like it.
The Raritan Valley line, Mike, is the line that Dave lives on, and it's also
awesome.
and it's one of his lines that he looks after, and it's also, Dave, are you ready?
I'm ready.
It's also the line that's managed by our very own Heath Hoffmeister.
That's true. Good call.
Yeah. Get Dave to give you a ride on the New Jersey Transit. That's lots.
I would like that.
We could definitely do that.
Yeah, at least got to go down to Somerville and meet Heath. Good guy. So we've given out the email address, and if you didn't catch after all that discussion, if you didn't catch it, this is on the free channel. You go to our website, which is amodellerslife.com, and you just scroll down there a little bit, and there'll be a picture of Bruce, the moderately agitated mailboy, in a particularly agitated state. And I know what I wanted to ask you, Mike.
Yeah.
Did you ever want a T-shirt with a hot dog on it?
I can't say that ever crossed my mind.
Well, if you go to, where do you buy most of your model railroad supplies?
Believe it or not, eBay.
Well, if you're ever looking for something in particular, I highly recommend that you go to Midwest Model Railroad, and their URL is midwestmodelrr.com. And if you go to their website and scroll across the navigation bar all the way to the right where it says AML, you click on that link, and boom, you are in a wonderland of Modeler's Life merchandise. You got hats, hoodies, mugs, T-shirts, and in there you will find a T-shirt with a hot dog on it.
Awesome.
And everybody should have one. That's what I saw at Tom Stock. Was 2 or 3 of the shirts with Fred the sock on the back. So there was.
I'm telling you, you can start your own apparel line, Lionel.
Yeah, exactly. Did you
hot dogs and Fred the sock?
Did you notice the shirt I was wearing at Crescent? The very first shirt I was wearing on the Saturday.
I did.
Yeah, the Onondaga cutoff. See if you.
I was very, very flattered that you would use that shirt. So awesome.
Exactly. And what were you doing? You use a Modeler's Life shirt to clean the bar or something?
I was proudly wearing my Modeler's Life T-shirt that I brought, and it turned out that after the last event, people had left a bunch of bottles of soda out. Well, the bottles in the fridge, that is. So I went to throw them out, got distracted, left them out, and then went back to it, saw them, opened them up to put them in the sink. And when you take a bottle of soda that's half full at 35 degrees and you bring it to 80 degrees and you open it, it explodes. So not only was the shirt covered with Coke, so was all of me, my hair, my arms. So it was time for the first shower of Crescent pretty quickly after I cleaned that bar.
I did that once in my car in the winter.
Oh,
I had one in the office, and then I took it with me, and I was maybe got 10 minutes from the office, and everything was cold. Somehow, anyways, and I opened up, and it just literally exploded right into my car. That's something, Mike. Did you know? As far as I'm concerned, model railroading, the hobby of model railroading is going to explode, and we're all going to be covered in model railroad goo.
I agree, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So we got the email. Oh yeah, and so this is on the free channel. This is episode. Whenever anybody's on for the first time, they're on an episode. Which there's 2 of those a month on the free channel. But Mike, if you ever feel like you're not getting enough podcasting and you'd like to listen to Modeler's Life twice a week, if you for just 16 cents a day, 365 payments of 16 cents, you can get on Tuesdays. There's another whole podcast that you can have available to you. And it is an excellent. It's an excellent value. 16. What can you buy for 16 cents a day?
Not much today. That's a hell of a deal.
It is, exactly. Basically, 1 month is the price of a gallon of gas.
Not bad.
There you go, and you get all kinds. On there, one of the popular ones is Uncle Dave's Fireside Chats. It's a kind of a regular feature. Where we listen to, we learn the philosophy of life by our very own Uncle Dave Abelies.
Uncle Dave.
Uncle Dave, that's right. I'm telling you, when you go into that layout, you're going to be like, Jesus, Lana was right. It is kind of like going into the Keebler Elf cookie tree.
I'm looking forward to it.
You're going to have a ball. I think we got it all covered. So now, Mike, there's at the very end, there's something that's very, very important. You have to, at the very, very end of the podcast, you have to say happy rails to you. You'll know the moment. If you pay attention, you'll understand what it is. The key is there's no singing, no dancing, no interpretation. It's just simply happy rails to you, and you say it with enthusiasm.
Okay.
All right. You think he's ready, Dave?
I think he's ready.
All right. Well, Mike, as we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, and the sun slowly sets over the back 40, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say,
Happy rails to you.
While in Busted Knuckle, guests of A Modeler's Life podcast stay at the Casa del Sol Motor Court and Inn, where late-night dancing at the Rumba Room is a magical event to be experienced.
It's another Lincoln Homer.
Perfect. Way better than my first time. I didn't know what the heck was going on.
Yeah, but Dave, you have to know. It's your personality.
Well, right. Well, as we're figuring out, the personality can being in your mid 40s with everything going on. You gotta open your eyes a little bit wider than they were. So it's an education. Education.
I couldn't believe I got nothing from you guys for Sticky Switch. That was
I thought our little laugh was perfect. But no, you want a big show. I mean, come on.
We just didn't want to encourage you, Lionel.
Well, now that I accept.